Hello, viewers, and it is my pleasure to welcome you once again for another episode of the Stakeholders Outreach Initiative. We are continuing our journey across the world and we are enjoying every bit of it. And as I take you around different countries, giving you a perspective about different regional markets and how they are coping up with the COVID-19 pandemic, how their markets are affected. Today, we are in a country called as Japan. We are all well aware Japan is known for its technical superiority or the technical advantage that it has and the things that it has achieved in the past. But along with that, Japan is also known worldwide for its traditional arts, including tea ceremonies, calligraphy, and flower arranging. The country has a legacy of distinctive gardens, sculptures, and poetry. Japan is home to more than a dozen UNESCO World Heritage Sites and is the birthplace of sushi. I'm sure many of you would have tried sushi, which is one of its most famous culinary exports. And my guest today from Japan joining us is Mr. Jin Sasaki, who is the MD, Managing Director for Infrastructure and Capital Projects with Deloitte, Japan. So before I begin for this interview, let me give you a brief introduction of Mr. Sasaki. And ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged because Mr. Sasaki, he has a blend of being an PPP specialist as well as an academician and a PPP author as well. So now, before I begin, Mr. Jin is a specialist in infrastructure and PPP advisory. He has more than 20 years of working in the field of PPP over 30 countries, including Lao PDR. He started his professional career at Choda Company Limited, a Japanese engineering consulting firm, followed by Mitsubishi Research Institute, Asian Development Bank, Ernst & Young Japan, and Deloitte. At Chodai and MRI, he served as a PPP transaction advisor to support Japanese central and local governments to study and procure PPP projects. At ADB, he served as a PPP specialist and contributed to establish the Office of PPPs. At ADB, he extended his international PPP network and accumulated knowledge and information about PPP across the world. At Ernst & Young and Deloitte, he has been leading teams which specializes overseas infrastructure PPP projects and supports government agencies and private companies to formulate and implement infrastructure PPP projects across the world. And as I just mentioned, he is an author as well. So let me speak about his academic qualifications as well. Aside from his professional works, he holds a PhD degree with a thesis titled as Study on VFM Analysis on PPP and PFI projects in Japan. He also published several books such as Principles of Project Finance, which is a second edition, a Japanese translation, and Introduction of Overseas Infrastructure Investment Structure and Principles of PPPs. He also teaches PPP at the University of Tokyo and APEC peer review PPP capacity training. Lastly, he has a high command of English and holds a certificate of project management professional by the Project Management Institute, US. We are glad, Mr. Sasaki and ladies and gentlemen, to have such a knowledgeable guest with us today to discuss about the perspective from Japan, especially in the context of PPPs. Mr. Sasaki, we thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us on this initiative.
Okay, you're welcome, Hasha-san. And I appreciate your kind and really nice introduction.
Okay. Before we begin, Mr. Sasaki, one thing that, as I mentioned in the introduction, what we are trying to understand is to gauge and measure the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on markets, on sectors, on how the entire demographics are coping up. And since we are now talking about the PPPs as well, could you please highlight for us how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted Japan, also in the context of business and then the PPPs?
Yes, in Japan, the COVID-19 has started to spread around March this year. And most of the companies and households are seriously affected by COVID-19, and many companies ask their staff to work from home. Japan has not been locked out or locked down, but many companies ask to work from home, and this drastically changes our working style. And in terms of consumption and business, the utility consumption such as water and power, electricity, doesn't affect it so much. But in terms of leisure business or food business and tourism business, they are seriously affected.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of infrastructure, especially transport, the road and railway infrastructure usage did not significantly reduce. However, in terms of transport using airport, that is seriously damaged.
Okay.
Now, after 6 months, it has been almost 6 months since spreading COVID-19, and the Japanese economy and lifestyle has been recovering well. And as I said, the society and the economy is now just started to recover.
Okay.
This is happening. This just happened around late August or September.
Okay. Okay. All right. In the midst of all this, Mr. Sasaki, how do you see the outlook for PPP projects? Because I'm sure Japan would be implementing a lot of PPP projects. I'm sure they would have got impacted a lot. So can you please walk us through, since now, I mean, just as I introduced you, that you have a 30 years of experience of dealing with the Japanese market on the PPP aspect.
Yes.
Can you please walk us through the entire, how PPPs have evolved in Japan and how has been the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes. Regarding PPP, or in Japan, mostly it is called PFI, Private Finance Initiative, and we have what we call as a PFI law in Japan.
Okay.
So according to the PPP project or PFI project, according to the law, we have over 700 projects.
700?
More than 700 projects. Okay. Yeah. And most of them, this is one of the characteristics of Japanese PPP or PFI, and most of our projects are what we call as availability payment type.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, probably mostly over 600 projects are availability payment type, while what we call as a BOT or concession type is somewhat 20 or 30 projects.
Okay.
For availability payment type, there's less effect of COVID-19 because most of the projects are already undergoing, and the future projects are also not seriously affected because there's a strong need for such service, and the government, central governments and local governments have already secured the budget to pay.
Okay.
So one thing about the PPP or PFI project procurement for availability payment type is the procurement process has been a bit delayed.
Okay.
Because the central governments and local governments, they are quite tied up with handling with COVID-19. So they, due to their limited resources, there's a tendency that such new PPP or PFI procurement process might be is a bit delayed.
Okay.
But as I said, there's a strong need and the budget is there. So although the procurement process is a little bit behind, that will come out anyway.
Okay.
That is a story about availability payment type. However, situation might be a little bit different for concession type or BOT type, where project get direct payment from the end user. For instance, we have airport PPP projects.
Okay.
And some are already rolled out, and some are still in the procurement process. The airport PPP project already launched has facing a bit of difficulty because the number of users of airport as well as the usage by airline companies has significantly decreased.
Okay. Okay.
And for new coming up airport projects, the government and local governments are also facing a bit difficulty because financial institutions like banks, they are more risk sensitive about demand due to COVID-19, and there's there's information that some banks are taking more serious, conservative position to loan to future airport projects. So I hear that in some consortium who wants to participate in an airport PPP project, they face some difficulties of getting funds from financial institutions.
Okay. So you just mentioned, that yes, airport PPPs are which are there quite active. So along with or apart from airport PPPs, what are the other sectors that are seeing the usage of PFI model or the PPP model in Japan, apart from the airports?
Well, other concession of BOT type now being adopted is in the water and wastewater treatment sector. This is happening, and compared to airport sector, as I said, the impact is less. So probably we should not be so pessimistic about the rolling out of a water and wastewater treatment PPP project in the future.
Okay. How about healthcare? Healthcare and education.
Healthcare projects. We do have some hospital PPP project, and it doesn't COVID-19 does not give a serious impact on the increase of hospital PPP project. Since there's a risk of COVID-19 spreading, in many hospitals, both public and private. Probably, as I said, investors as well as lenders, they will be more risk sensitive about the effect of COVID-19. Okay, all right. So, Mr. Sasaki, since you mentioned about the evolution of PPPs and especially the way it has got impacted, there are risks, certainly, yes. How do you see the entire investment outlook now, since you are a project finance expert and that too dealing with the PFI or the PPP projects? How do you see the entire investment outlook for the PPP projects in Japan in the context of COVID-19 and also the coming economic recovery that we all will see? So what's your assessment on that? Yes, actually the investment appetite depends on sector. Yes, as I said, for instance, airport PPP investment, not only investors but also lenders are really cautious on making new investments. So probably in airport sector, it might be difficult to be optimistic about the increase of investment. In the meanwhile, Japanese governments are promoting introduction of renewable energy, such as solar power and wind power, and there's strong appetite for not only Japanese companies but also the foreign companies to make an inbound investment in Japan. So renewable energy is one area you mean to say? Yes. Okay. So this sector is really active, and governments, both central and local, they are preparing to bid the or business right to investors regarding solar power and wind power projects. Okay. So you mean to say that renewable energy is one sector that would be seeing a lot of investment appetite in the coming days in Japan when it comes to PFI projects? Is that what you say? Yeah. And another sector which has been relatively active using PFI and PPP is solid waste treatment projects. Solid waste, okay. Yes. Many solid waste management project facility, they are adapting so-called waste energy or waste energy, what we call as a WT type. Yes. And, WT type, and that is has been quite popular in Japan, and most of them are done by PFI or PPP type. So regardless of the effect of COVID-19, probably such an waste to energy project will increase as a general tendency. And how about the power sector, electricity? Our sector, as you know, the mostly power resources now are atomic and carbon and how do you call that? Mostly atomic and coal-fired and oil power plants, and the share of the such energy resources is very quite high compared to other, not only developed but also developing countries.
Correct.
Therefore, as I said, Japan's government is now trying to change the portfolio of energy resources to increase the renewable energy resources more.
Okay, all right, I understand that. So, Mr.
Yeah.
Sasaki, Japan
Yes.
is globally known for its technology, basically. I mean, the Japanese technology is world-renowned. Now, when we are interacting with a lot of different countries across Africa, Central Asia, and South America as well, many countries are adopting and using PPP model to increase the ICT penetration or the digitization in their countries. What I want to understand from you, or rather as a learning for other countries, now since you mentioned that PPPs are quite old for Japan, and Japan has seen a solid technological growth or progress in the past 20, 30 years. Can you say, or would you rather say that PPPs, the government has used PPP model in the ICT and technology sector, or is it currently using it? Can you comment on that something?
Yes. That is a really key part of Japanese government and Japanese companies in terms of infrastructure. For conventional technologies like civil works or bridge engineering, compared to other countries' technologies, Japan's how can I say, Japan's competitiveness or superiority is becoming less, as I understand.
Is becoming?
The competitiveness is becoming smaller compared to other countries' companies. In terms of some key technologies, such as ITS, Intelligent Transport System, or disaster prevention, and what we call as MAS, Mobility as a Service. IC ticketing system. Such kind of key technologies is quite popular in Japan, and such technologies still has a strong competitiveness across the world.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know.
So, as I said, we are thinking the inbound investment as well as outbound investment. Inbound investment in Japan, such technology is quite popular. But governments and companies are also envisaging to export those kind of technology to other countries as well.
Okay, all right. Mr. Sasaki, can you comment with regards to, or help us understand, for a country like Japan, when it comes to PPP ecosystem, and considering and seeing the way it has evolved, what are the challenges and issues you face when it comes to PPP projects? Can you just highlight some broad issues and challenges?
You're asking the challenges in general?
In general, yeah. Challenges in general that PPP projects face in Japan?
I see.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure whether this is appropriate to say it as a challenge or not. But there's we have a small number of road PPP projects, and we don't have many number of water and wastewater treatment projects. The reason is that the existing laws and regulation does not fully allow private companies to run the business, especially road sector and the water sector.
So you mean to say that in the road sector, the government has not allowed much private sector participation in Japan? Okay.
Yeah. So basically, in Japan, the many highways and toll roads, the law regulates that it should be run by former public corporation.
Okay.
Does not fully allow pure private companies to run the road business.
Okay.
So in order for pure private companies to run the road business, it needs a kind of special exception treatment. of either national government diet or national government or local government.
Okay.
Such an extension procedure is required. And this is also a case with the water sector. It's possible, but it takes it requires a kind of complicated procedures and long lengthy procedures to get a clearance. So this effectively is a kind of challenge.
Any particular reason you feel for this, Mr. Sasaki? I mean, what can be the reason for this, if you can help us understand?
Yes, it's difficult to answer, but basically, as I said, those are already stipulated in existing laws. So, as we understand that in order to amend the law, because
you mentioned because of the law needs to be amended, and it's a long process. Is that what you mentioned?
There are mainly, I think, two reasons. One is probably what we call as a vested interest.
Okay.
Yeah, it may be true that some politicians and bureaucrats and other stakeholders want to retain their vested interest, so they may oppose to change existing laws and regulations to open their business to private companies. This might be one reason. And second reason is kind of a value for money aspect. As I understand, when I recall the discussion in the UK, there's still a question as to whether PPP or PPI delivers value for money to the government or not. In Japan, such a similar discussion is still happening. And as I said, many politicians and bureaucrats, they are not strongly convinced about whether PPP or PFI will really bring some value for money to the government. They are not really convinced. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So if it is clearly proven or verified, more politicians and bureaucrats may be willing to adopt or promote PFI PPP.
I got it.
But such effects or value for money or merits of using PFI PPP are not so clear. They are not so motivated or driven to always.
Okay, all right. Mr. Sasaki, can you please help us understand with regards to how is Japan or how is the ecosystem out there managing the aspect of skill development and capacity building, especially for the PPP professionals or PPP practitioners? So how is it doing there? I mean, does the government run a program, or do you have like trainings done? So how are you managing the resources with regards to when it comes to PPP projects?
Okay. Hassan, are you asking about people on the government side or private side?
In general, private and public. So in general, I'm asking you.
Okay. So I think the situation is a bit, quite different for public sector and the private sector.
Okay.
Japan's PFI and PPP project for private company, they establish dedicated, sections for PPP, and many companies try to build or develop the PPP specialists in their company. So they will not change their posts so frequently.
Okay.
Once they are assigned to such a PPP section, they will be grown as PPP specialists. This is a private side cases. Or for the government side, such capacity building, especially for local government, is difficult to be conducted.
Okay.
First reason is that many of local government people, they don't understand finance. They don't understand private companies. So basically, they don't have any basic or background knowledge of the private sector. This is one.
Okay.
In many governments, both central and local, there's a routine, job post routine, and many officers will change their position and post every 2 years. Yeah.
Okay.
So if they experience a PPP for 3 years, then they will move to the next position, which have nothing to do with PPP.
Okay. Okay. I understand that.
Yeah. And there's one more reason. We have, as I said, more than 700 PPP PFI projects, but one government entity mostly has an experience of only one PPP or PFI projects.
Okay.
What I mean is, if the one government entity can repeat many projects, there should be a kind of accumulation of knowledge and experience.
Okay.
However, many local governments, especially local government, they will do PPP project like once in a life.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So the experience and knowledge, information, accumulation of sharing is really difficult to do because they have one PPP or PFI projects.
So, I mean, certainly what I understand from you is capacity building and skill development is certainly a challenge. One of the challenges that we can say, I mean, to get a uniform level of skill development for all professionals, be it the private sector or the public sector. I mean, that is something that we can say is a big need in Japan.
Yes. For instance, Ministry of Land Infrastructure, they have less number of PPP projects, and it's difficult to maintain PPP persons at their hands. This is the situation.
Okay, okay, that's great to know. Mr. Sasaki, as I introduced and as I mentioned about your introduction, that you are an author as well. So can you please speak or share something about the book that you have written and what is it all about for our viewers?
Yes. For international publication, I translated 2 books. Both are written by Edward Yescombe. He's a UK consultant and specializes in project finance and PPP. And the book I translated is Principles of Project Financing. Finance. This is a kind of world bestseller, and there's a first version and first edition and second edition. And many Japanese bankers read this book, both in Japanese.
Okay.
Next one I translated is that Public Partnership for Infrastructure, also written by E.R. Yeston and Edward Hankerson. This is for Japanese government and local government, as well as private investors. But since in Japan, we have existing laws and regulations, and for some sectors, it's kind of challenging to introduce PPP and PFI. But I still believe that there's an opportunity and chance to open up those, kind of closed market, and I hope that this infra PPP book will help the Japanese politicians and bureaucrats to review their system and regulations and open new investment opportunities for private investors.
Okay, so what you just mentioned is that the book that you have authored, I mean, a couple of books. So one is in the project finance, and the other one is the foundations of a public-private partnership. Is that what I'm getting it correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
okay. And what you just mentioned also is that your book is mostly referred to by most of the bankers in Japan. That's what you just mentioned. Certainly, project finance is one of the important aspects. And since now you definitely have a very elaborative experience of working with the Asian Development Bank as well as the Ernst & Young and the other global organizations. So I'm sure your book would be covering a lot of perspectives. So these books are translated in English as well?
These books are originally written in English, and I translated.
English. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And I have also published my own writing about the infrastructure investment in PPP in overseas. overseas market, but obviously written in Japanese, probably it's kind of difficult to share those with, people.
So
Mostly,
infrastructure investments in the Japanese markets. So that's another book, but it's in the Japanese language.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sure you'll be soon translating that to English as well. I mean, we'll soon see a translation.
Yeah, I do hope so, but it may take some time to to publish the English version. But that is one of my dreams.
Okay. So, Mr. Sasaki, what we understand from our conversation is that Japan is a promising market, and some of the sectors that you highlighted certainly are the airports that you just mentioned are seeing PPP projects, as well as the road sector, where kind of PPP projects are there. But infrastructure still remains a hot area for international investments and for inbound, just as you mentioned. Inbound investments in Japan. So that's one area that you say are, it's one of the important areas for Japan when it comes to PFIA projects.
Yes, I would like to emphasize especially the utility sector, such as power. The utility sectors, such as power and water, wastewater treatment, and waste energy. We have strong business opportunities in those sectors.
Great. So what I want to just re-emphasize is, viewers, what Mr. Sasaki means is stressing upon is that the utilities sector, when it comes to the power and water, as well as waste to energy, waste management, and very, very important, it is the renewable energy sector. That is something which would be seeing a lot of positive investments, a lot of investments in the coming days, especially when we see now towards a post-COVID-19 economic recovery in global markets. Japan certainly offers certain sectors, as I just mentioned, utilities, which is power and water, waste to energy, waste management, solid waste management, as well as very important, the renewable energy sector. So these are the sectors, as what Mr. Sasaki has mentioned, are promising. Certainly, and our appeal for global stakeholders and investors certainly would be that yes, Japan is a promising market. It has seen a good positive track record for PPP projects in the past. The fundamentals are strong. The Japanese economy is ranked in one of the top 5 economies in the world, and this definitely calls, and this certainly makes a call for global investors to consider investing in the Japanese market.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sasaki, for sharing your views with us and helping us understand how the Japanese ecosystem is for PPP projects and how has been the impact of COVID-19 in Japan. We appreciate, and on behalf of our followers, global followers, and my team at P3 World Council, we would like to thank you so much and appreciate your time on this stakeholder outreach initiative.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, it's my great pleasure. Thank you very much for the interview.
And we wish a speedy economic and a healthy recovery for Japan from the COVID-19 pandemic.
And the same to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Sasaki.